So Mick Schumacher is one of 3 rookies on the F1 grid for 2021, and based on his surname, there's a lot of pressure on this guy's shoulders. He's already being tipped for a seat at Ferrari in 2023, but will he live up to the expectations? Is Mick Schumacher a potential future Formula 1 world champion? Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. To determine whether Schumacher's a future world champion, we'll need to take a look at his rise to Formula 1 through junior categories to see where he's come from. We'll need to look at his future potential with both Haas and then subsequently Ferrari. And then finally, I'll take a quick look at Schumachers Competition and the other drivers that he would need to beat in a bid to win a world championship. Schumacher's rise to Formula 1. So Mick's rise through the motorsport ranks was well and truly in the spotlight for obvious reasons. Starting out in karting under the pseudonym of Mick Jr., by 2015 Schumacher graduated to Formula 4 for Van Amersfoort Racing, where he took 1 win and ended up 10th in the championship. The following year, in 2015, Schumacher remained in Formula 4 but joined the Prema Power team. It was in 2016 that Schumacher started to make his mark, competing in both Italian and German Formula 4, where he came second in the championship on both occasions. But he'd made his mark in the championship with the Prema team, and had shown that he was ready to take the step up to Formula 3 for 2017. Alongside Mick in the Prema team were the familiar faces of Guan Yu Zhou, Maximilian Günther and Callum Ilott. But Schumacher struggled in Formula 3, ending up finishing 12th with just a single podium finish to his name, the worst of the Prema team that year. One thing to note about 2017 though is who won the championship, as Lando Norris took the championship in his rookie season. So despite coming into Formula 3 at the same time, it was the British driver that was able to stamp his authority on the championship in that first year. Schumacher remained in Formula 3 for 2018, and it was during this season that the German driver proved what he was capable of, winning the championship with 8 wins across the season. It was a slow start to the year though for Schumacher, as he took just 1 of these wins during the first 5 rounds of the 10-round championship. But his dominance across the second half of the season was impressive to say the least, as he ended up 57 points ahead of second place Dan Ticktum. So after an impressive Formula 3 campaign at the second time of asking, Schumacher graduated to Formula 2, and at the time he was also announced as the newest driver of the Ferrari Driver Academy. Once again, he raced with Prema, where he struggled to find his feet in the new series with a number of errors. He did take his first race win in the category in Hungary, but he struggled overall, finishing 12th in the championship with 53 points. But once again, much like his Formula 3 campaigns, Schumacher bounced back in 2020, winning the Formula 2 World Championship. It was a close championship with 3 contenders going into the final weekend in Bahrain, but with his 2 wins and 10 podiums in total, the 21-year-old had done enough across the season to take the title by 14 points, achieving 215 to Callum Ilott's 201. During the season, it had emerged that Ferrari had assured Schumacher a Formula 1 seat should he finish in the top 3 positions in the championship and achieve enough points to qualify for a super licence. And sure enough, it was announced that Schumacher would drive for Haas in Formula 1 for the upcoming season. So Schumacher's rise to Formula 1 was characterised by having a challenging first season in a category and then going on to deliver on the expectations that came with his surname in the second. Now, I'm not sure whether his challenges were emphasised by the fact that the media spotlight was on him, or whether he just struggled to adjust to new categories when he entered them. But I think it's something that we need to consider when looking at whether Schumacher could be a Formula 1 world champion in the future, and for his prospects at Haas for 2021. Schumacher's potential with Haas and Ferrari. So now Mick Schumacher is taking the step up to Formula 1, where the German driver will face his biggest challenge yet, as he steps up once again into a new series. So based on his track record, I don't believe he will have an outstanding season in his first year as he gets up to speed. Starting off looking at Haas for 2021, and the team itself has been heading backwards in recent seasons, with their 2020 championship finish of 9th being their joint worst outcome from their 5 years in the sport so far. The team have tended to struggle with different aspects of their design in recent times. As in 2019, the team couldn't get to grips with their tyres. They spent a large part of the season trying to work out exactly what was wrong with their car, as they failed to recognise the issues. Team principal Gunther Steiner has also admitted that through the year, the team failed to acknowledge the data coming from their drivers. At the Spanish Grand Prix, when both Magnussen and Grosjean recognised the issues and flagged them to the team, they were not listened to. Now, this is a worrying fact that you would hope the team personnel have learned from, but going into 2021 with 2 rookie drivers may mean that the team have more of a tendency to follow their own data as opposed to trusting 2 young and inexperienced drivers. In 2020, Haas had an even worse season than 2019, achieving just 3 points. At the Portuguese Grand Prix, it emerged that the team had struggled with suspension issues all season. Their issues had been relating to their rear suspension overheating, and when cooling, it ended up completely changing the balance. Subsequently, the aero setup was then off, as a result in the change in ride height. Now this would create difficulties for any team or driver, but once again, it showed that the team had struggled to bounce back from a tricky 2019 and ended up at the back of the grid once again, competing with Williams. Their 2020 challenges were compounded, however, with the fact that their Ferrari power unit took a step backwards. Their power unit was one of the key highlights of their 2019 car, as it was the best in the field, but their lack of power for 2020 took one of their only advantages from the car and moved them further backwards. So the team have made a move to change both of their drivers, from experienced midfield drivers that have both achieved podium finishes in the past, to instead take on 2 rookies that have 0 experience in Formula 1, a risky move to say the least. And their decision is a sign of just how much of a rebuild job this will be for the American team. Realistically, they won't be challenging many other teams in 2021, and will do well to score any points through the year, in my opinion. But does that mean that the team are actually making the move with an eye on the new 2022 technical regulations? Well, the change in regulations alongside the changes to the sporting regulations, including the budget cap and the adjustments of wind tunnel and CFD time for teams based on their championship position, could well mean that taking a punt on focusing on the 2022 car could well be the best option for the team. So for Schumacher, it could well mean that although 2021 would be a development and a learning year, should he remain at Haas, he could be given the opportunity to fight nearer the front in Formula 1. So Haas is not necessarily a bad step for his first F1 drive, and other drivers have been placed in worse cars and been able to make a big impression. Take George Russell for example. The young Mercedes driver has now had 2 years in the Williams car and has impressed in his ability to compete, particularly on a Saturday. So for Mick Schumacher, he needs to seize this opportunity and make the most of it. To add, his history in the junior formulas hints towards the fact that he could struggle in his first season in the sport anyway, as he gets used to the team around him. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Schumacher struggling early on, to then improve once he has a year's experience under his belt. The other point to consider on this is whether the changes to the regulations for 2022 could mean Schumacher struggles again. Will the changes to the car feel like another category change for the German driver, or will he have learned from his initial season and gotten to know the team around him and experience the general racing in Formula 1? Only time will tell on that one, but I think it's expected that he could take a while to get up to speed in the category. And this expectation has been mirrored by Ferrari team principal Mattia Binotto, who has said that the team are already assessing Schumacher to make the jump into a Ferrari seat for 2023 rather than 2022. Now this is what the team is sharing in the public domain, and I think there are a couple of reasons for this. Number one, I think Binotto is talking about 2023 because the team's new driver, Carlos Sainz, has been brought in with a 2-year contract which covers 2021 and 2022. Now I don't doubt for a second that Ferrari would be willing to cut a contract short, but it shows that the team have confidence in their decision at least for the next couple of years. Number two, I think Ferrari is saying this to set the fans' expectations right. Their most recent Ferrari Driver Academy graduate, Charles Leclerc, did get that move from Alfa Romeo up to the main team after just a single season, and it was a massive success, as within a year he'd done enough for the team to look to replace their 4-time world champion driver, Sebastian Vettel. This time, however, I think Ferrari are aware that it could take a bit longer for Schumacher to get up to speed, hence the timeframes. But making the step up for Ferrari is definitely on the cards, and the expectations on Schumacher's shoulders is palpable. And the obvious reason for this is the media and public desire to see Ferrari's most successful driver's son follow in his father's footsteps and bring the team back to the front of the grid. The value of having a Schumacher in a Ferrari isn't known, but this is almost certainly another aspect that the team will be looking at during Mick's time at Haas. And then, to determine whether Mick has a shot at a world championship, we have to see whether Ferrari is capable of doing so. And based on their 2020 performance, it didn't exactly offer much hope of a title challenge anytime soon. The power unit gap between themselves and Mercedes was bigger than ever, and the team had the least amount of power on the grid. So whether they can recover from the lows of last year and get back to where they've been in the past is anyone's guess by 2023. Then you can take a look at the team and whether they are really in a position to take that step to achieve either the Constructors or the Drivers' Championship. Many people are looking at Mattia Binotto thinking he isn't the right team principal for the team, and Ferrari have had a significant amount of changes to their personnel since their last championship victory in 2008. Do they need to bring in a few more people that have won the championship more recently to give themselves the edge over their rivals? Or are the team in a position that they could compete come 2022? If they can't though, and he wants to win a world championship, then Schumacher will need to look outside Ferrari in a few years down the line. Schumachers Competition. The final point in this video is Schumacher's competition in his bid to win a world championship. As is the way in Formula 1, your main rival's your teammate, so if and when he takes that step up to Ferrari, his likely teammate will be Charles Leclerc, a driver that has really made his mark on the Italian team so far. He's made it his own, and even with the Schumacher surname, it could be difficult to unsettle that team dynamic. Then of course you have the other potential drivers that could be there if a team takes a step in the right direction. Schumacher is part of a next generation of drivers, including George Russell, Max Verstappen, Lando Norris and of course Charles Leclerc. These guys are all insanely talented, and I believe if given the right machinery, they could challenge for a title. Then on top of that, once the so-called old guard of Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel and Fernando Alonso move on, could someone between those groups, like Daniel Ricciardo, be in a position to challenge for the title? Either way, for Mick Schumacher to become a world champion, he would need to compete with and beat the best drivers in the world. So, is Schumacher a potential world champion? Well, it's difficult to say for sure, but I think he's certainly up there with the best. You can't deny a driver who's a Formula 3 and Formula 2 champion. He will have a steep learning curve, but his path to a top team in Ferrari looks relatively seamless. So he absolutely could win a championship. For me though, I fear he isn't quite at the same level of the other drivers around him. Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari, Max Verstappen in the Red Bull, or George Russell who will presumably be in a Mercedes before long. I fear that Schumacher, for now at least, is a bit behind these guys. But that doesn't mean it can't change. After all, he is just 21 years old. So that's my view on whether Schumacher's a potential world champion. What's your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. And if you've enjoyed this video and watched this far, then please leave it a like and subscribe for more F1 opinion content in the future.